Okay, so we're in A mode now. I know where the horn is. All right, let's go catch him. Sorry about that. All right, so I guess it's not too bad. You just have to be a little bit familiar with the bike to really deal with it. Bike doesn't really have that much power, so it's not that much. It's really, you have to have at least a 10, 20 I don't know, 10, 20 minutes on it to get used to the power. I just don't like the handlebars on this bike. They're just too high. I think it's a waste to have the bars up this high. And the pegs are not as far forward as I remember, or back I should say. So it's not so bad. Yeah, I'm right around here at 6,000 RPM. Third. I just don't think it has all that much power. It has decent power. I think it's more like 750. Now it's okay. Nothing I would say is too much. I think this would be an adequate starter bike. But then I'm jaded, I guess, to that extent. I think it would be an adequate first bike. Let's not say starter bike, okay? Let's say first bike. The difference being that buying a bike and learning how to ride are two different things. I think that's important to keep in mind. By the time you buy a bike, you should be pretty comfortable on one. And any idea of buying a bike and then learning how to ride on that bike is mistaken, I think. It's like marrying the first girl you date. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Unfortunately, that's just how it works. Don't make that mistake. Don't ever buy a bike with the intention of learning how to ride on it, unless you're willing to, sell a bike in the long run because it's just not what you want, which is understandable. It's not too bad. I think I could totally get familiar or comfortable with this after so many miles. And you do kind of have to do more clutching work than if you could just gently twist it. I mean, I can't complain. My bike is just so awesome off idle. It's perfectly smooth, like just butter off idle. It'll go right down at 1500 RPM before it starts to buck at all. So it's just nothing to ride it, with the partial throttle. This one's it's gonna keep you on your toes. Let's put it that way, like that. So you're not gonna cruise a lot with the clutch close because there's too much play in that throttle and there's too much power right when you twist it. So we're gonna have to use my second or third law of motorcycle riding. Combination of first, second, and third. Jesus. Just hit those bumps and it's like bucking. A, leave a lot of space. B, leave yourself some speed margin. And my idea here is to see if I can make this demo ride without dumping this bike. Because it is dramatically different than my 12R in that it just is a lot more sensitive to the throttle than my bike is. But it just doesn't have the power of the 12R. It just isn't there. It's much more of an on-off transition. But I wouldn't say that it is a huge problem. I'd say it's something you got to keep in mind. especially on the fact that this bike has been down and wants to ride a little bit to the left. At least the bars are not straight, certainly. I think the seat's off a little bit too. But what I found with just about every bike that I've ever ridden is, it takes some miles to get used to it, and then it just becomes second nature. And to hop on a bike and evaluate it is really tough because it just isn't going to have the same feel for you when you first get on it that it's going to have after you've been riding it for a day or two or a week, not to mention 6 months, a year. You and the bike are going to be like, it's like it'd be an extension of you in a sense. So you just have to watch out on gravelly roads, things like that, and this bike requires a very soft hand on the throttle, very slow, very patient, but not unmanageable. You just have to really dial down your hand in terms of the rate at which you twist the throttle if you want to ride it smoothly. I'm riding it in A mode right now, and I'm not having any problem controlling it as long as I'm not going over bumps and the bumps are not throwing my hands around on the throttle. And he's saying, oh, it's got a monster motor and it'll lift the wheel really easy. And maybe it does because you're sitting upright. You're already halfway up as it is. Maybe it will if you're absolutely a goofball on the throttle, it'll come up, but I don't see that as a problem in just normal riding like this. My biggest concern, in normal riding like this is, how close can I go to the braking limit before the front end cuts loose? That's keeping it between about 6 and 8. And with about an eighth of a throttle, honestly, not even that hard to turn it. And that was nice. I mean, it was certainly adequate in a way that the FZ-07 is not. The FZ-07 would have required me to be 4,000 before it started making any power. Would have gone about half throttle. Would have gone 4 to 8 and run out of gas, out of air, just that quick. Boom. And this one, I just comfortably ran it up to about 8, hardly looking at the tack. It doesn't take a lot of effort to accelerate it at a reasonable speed. So I would feel more comfortable with the bike, the power level like this, than with the FZ-07. Now, the problem is, the big question is, you would feel more comfortable with the power level than a lower powered bike, but does that make the higher powered bike the bike that you really want? If you're going to spend a lot of time riding on roads like this, in Delaware, I was riding over here from Maryland, and you get out here in Delaware, people are driving the speed limit, they're really slow, you don't need a lot of acceleration unless you're going to pass somebody who's being a jackass. And what you would really want in exchange is the miles per gallon. And that's where this bike, I would say 45 miles per gallon is the estimate I've heard is the very best you're going to get with the stock bike. I can't say, we're not going to get a chance to run the tank out. The gauge says full. I'm running in 6th gear now at 53 miles an hour, and the tack is at 3,500 RPM, and I've got plenty of power under my right hand. It isn't too jumpy, but there's definitely an engine there. even at 3,500. But 3,500, man, that's, like I said, 750 territory for cruising. At 53 miles an hour, that's at least 1,000 RPM higher than I would be cruising in my ZX-12. Not to mention, it's fifth gear. So, and the big difference between the ZX-12 and this bike is that while this bike, you're getting most of the power in the 4 to 8 range. Maybe the high part of the curve, is up there by 9 or 10. On my bike, I'd just be getting into the power band. It's just like an appetizer at 4,000, 5,000 RPM. It doesn't get into the power band until 7, 8, 9, and it just comes on like a bomb. I should, maybe not bomb. Bomb's not the right word, but it comes on with a good solid rush of power. The higher the RPMs get, it just rushes more and more and more and more power. So you've got adequate power at low RPMs. You've got a good, strong amount of power in the mid band, and then when you hit 7, 8, man, that thing just vroom, it just takes right off. Where this one, I can tell it's more mellow in the mid-range. And in the, I'm in first gear, shit. No, it's much more mellow in the mid-range. Has some power, 6,000, 7,000 RPM, but it's nowhere near what I would call a strong motor. It's just an adequate motor. Whereas the FZ-07 is a tepid motor that isn't too weak. It's capable, let's put it that way. So, yeah, I think, I would say, a week or so on this bike, you'd be perfectly comfortable with it. Even in A mode, the B mode and standard modes would be much more relaxed. I could tell coming out of the showroom, out of the demo area, that the B mode was very mellow, very damped. Just as for safety, I came around there with the clutch in. It came out of the straight before I now that one I had it out. And I just didn't want any surprises at that point in time. So I clutched in the first part, and then the second part I just left the clutch out. The big thing I would say is that there's a dead zone just as you crack the throttle open, and then it comes on, So it's like a lot of bikes where it tries to pretend it has some throttle slack, but it's not really throttle slack. It's just, the system is working. What's not working is you're not getting any engine response. So you don't get any engine response for the first, say, 2 or 3 degrees of the throttle, and then it comes on, And it's trying to mimic cable slack, but it doesn't do a good job of it. But is it bad? No, it's not awful. You just have to turn your hand slowly, let's put it that way. And you have to give it a little bit of throttle before you let the clutch out, so that the engine is actually making power when you let the clutch out. See, not that it can't be ridden or it's difficult, it's just it takes a little bit more finesse than certainly a bike with less power, and certainly a bike with a little bit softer mode off idle.